was CIA presence in Ukraine, right? There was actually a report on this by the New York Times.
Yeah, it was reportedly a heavy CIA presence in Ukraine. Yes.
And this is a piece from the
Right.
Times, The Spy War, how the CIA secretly helped Ukraine fight Putin. For more than a decade, the United States has nurtured a secret intelligence partnership with Ukraine that is now critical for both countries in countering Russia. So was this surprising to you? Did you already know about this?
Oh, no. In situations like that, the CIA is always the very first to go in. Not that they're necessarily going to accomplish anything, so much as they're there sort of as a little, tip of the spear, as they like to call themselves. And you set up communications, you set up logistics. You've got to have a pipeline for weapons and ammunition and night vision goggles and all the stuff that you're going to end up turning over to the other side. And then the military starts coming in. But the CIA is usually there to set things up quickly, to liaise with a foreign government. In this case, they would have liaised with the Ukrainian intelligence service, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. You get the propaganda going. Yeah, this is how they do it.
Wow. And what do you think about the proxy war in Ukraine and what motivated it? And if there's going to be a difference now with Trump?
I like to think that I'm consistent on these issues. If we're going to be supporters of peace, then we have to be supporters of peace, right? I was opposed to this war from the very beginning. With that said, I don't blame the Russians, because the United States told them time after time after time that NATO would not expand to their borders. And we lied time after time after time. And so finally, when we said yet again that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO, and then we began talks with the Ukrainians to join NATO, and we supported the overthrow of the pro-Moscow government in Ukraine. They said they've had enough. They've had enough. And so they crossed the border. Now, again, war is not the right way to go about these things. But if the U.S. is lying every time they open their mouth when they talk to you about this issue, then what else are you going to do? Now, with that said, and I know at least among the general populace of the United States, I'm going to be in the minority when I say this. If we are to believe what Marco Rubio said today, coming out of Saudi Arabia, this is great, right? So the war would end soon, in the next 4 weeks. Today, MasterCard and Visa announced that they would start allowing charges again in Russia, which means that sanctions on Russian banks are going to be lifted. Trump said he wants sanctions to be lifted in the next 4 weeks. There's going to be an election in Ukraine, whether Zelensky likes it or not, and he does not like it even a little bit.
Yeah.
He said in the last couple of hours.
Bad ratings.
Yeah.
Bad polling.
Yeah. Bad polling. He's going to lose. Ukraine will not become a part of NATO. British troops will not be stationed in Ukraine, but Ukraine would be allowed to join the European Union. Okay, that sounds like a plan. And then maybe if we don't keep each other on the brink of war, we can start working on relations with China, relations with Iran, and maybe somebody might someday have the guts to stand up to the Israelis. There was another thing that Rubio said. He didn't commit to anything, but he said that the Saudi government offered to be a mediator between the U.S. and Iran. Well, listen, we all know that Donald Trump is obsessed with winning the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right.
And the old
and
saying,
the Abraham Accords, yeah.
And the Abraham Accords, which was a terrible idea from the beginning because it just screwed the Palestinians.
Of course.
But
he doesn't care. Yeah.
He doesn't care. But if he really, really wants that Nobel Peace Prize, and he's cognizant of the fact that only Nixon could go to China, maybe only Trump could go to Tehran. And the Iranians are not, losing their minds every time Trump says something. They're willing to take it one day at a time and see where this thing leads.
That would be great. We actually have a clip of Rubio. Let's play that.
Ultimately, the Russian side will be indispensable to this effort, and so that process will begin. And then the third is, together with those other two, is beginning to engage in identifying the extraordinary opportunities that exist should this conflict come to a acceptable end, the credible opportunities that exist to partner with the Russians geopolitically on issues of common interest, and frankly economically on issues that hopefully will be good for the world and will also improve our relations in the long term between these two important countries.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to that. I was very fortunate a year and a half ago to have lunch with the Russian ambassador to the United States. He invited 6 independent journalists to come to lunch to talk about how U.S.-Russian relations might be improved even in a time of war. And I said to him, I had several ideas. Speaking not as a journalist, but as a former CIA officer, there are ways in which the U.S. and Russia can cooperate even during a time of war: counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, and counter-proliferation. Now, I wouldn't trust the U.S. in counter-narcotics. I probably wouldn't even trust them in counterterrorism, for that matter, at least not as far as Russia goes. But it's something to think about. But I said, there's one other thing that you might want to give thought to. I said, grabbing a gay black woman with a little bit of weed oil and giving her 14 years at hard labor is a bad look, right? She violated your law. Yeah. Was it worth 14 years at hard labor? Of course not. But it's a bad look. And it turns Americans who might otherwise be open to a warming of relations with Russia against Russia.
Terrible PR move. Yeah.
Terrible PR move. That was the only thing that got him angry during the lunch. And he said, do you know how many Russians are in American prisons? I'll tell you, 1,500. I know because I visit them. Wow. 1,500. He said, why don't you release them? I said, and that is an excellent point.
Yeah, of course.
And perhaps we should have a large-scale prisoner exchange. But what I'm saying is, for Americans, grabbing someone who probably has been oppressed for much of her life is just a really bad PR move. Yeah.
Right. Well, it is kind of insane to hear someone this dyed-in-the-wool neocon.
Yeah. How do you like that?
Statements like coming out to the left of Biden on this stuff.
Seriously. Oh, that's a very good point. He's coming out on the left of Biden. And Marco Rubio has a long history of being a Russia hawk.
Yeah.
So you know that this policy came directly from Donald Trump.
Right. It's Iran, Russia. Well, it'll be interesting what happens with Cuba and Venezuela.
Oh my God. Well, when Rubio went to Venezuela and then came home with, a half a dozen American prisoners, I thought, oh my God, we're going to start treating Venezuela with respect now. How do you like that?
Yeah.
And then he changed his mind a day or two later. Right. But, maybe something good will happen.
Yeah. That's why you have to take these things with grains of salt, right? Because especially since Trump is so mercurial and, motivated by such personal slights to a larger extent than I think other politicians are. So there's everything. He's a total opportunist, obviously, but I think he's less ideologically bound than other politicians. So it's harder to predict his commitments.
I went to Cuba last year too. It was the first time I had ever gone to Cuba.
I love Cuba. I've been
trip of a lifetime. I loved every second that I was there. I loved the Cuban people and the music's amazing. We have such a tight embargo on them though that you can only eat what they're able to grow and whatever happens to be in season. But anyway, we even met with the president and one of the vice presidents. They have 3 vice presidents, but we met with the president. We met with one of the vice presidents. We met with labor leaders and culture leaders and all different kinds of people. And all of them had only the nicest things to say about the United States, not necessarily about our government, but about American people. Literally everybody has relatives in the United States, mostly in Florida, but they want nothing more than normalized relations with the U.S. And they were just perplexed as to why Joe Biden didn't restore full diplomatic relations.